Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Roshni. We're writers helping writers with whatever writing ailments you might have.
Whether it's related to your craft or your career, we can help.
Are you ready for your session?
The
The doctors
doctors
are
are
in.
in.
So, today we're talking about something very near and dear to both of our hearts, and probably to a lot of yours as well. Is Hollywood dead?
Dun dun dun.
There's been a whole slew of recent articles. We'll put some of them in the show notes, but yeah, let's go.
Articles and videos, talking about how Hollywood is dead. But, it's not a new thing. I found articles from 2017 and earlier, 2013, all saying the same thing. And it's not like this snuck up on Hollywood. The changing world and the changing environment is not all because of COVID. It's because of a lot of things. All businesses have to deal with: economics, habits changing, and stuff like that.
I think COVID sort of has accelerated the situation.
Well, it's certainly made, a big chunk of Hollywood, which is theatrical movies, suffer dramatically, and people talking about, will it ever come back? So that's a whole theater kind of part of the discussion. And I think AMC recently announced they had new financing. They're going to be fine. So, and with the vaccine coming, being more prevalent, hopefully, this summer we'll be seeing some blockbusters in the theaters again. Hopefully very distanced from our neighbors, but hopefully, within we'll be with our friends that have all been vaccinated, and then everyone else can be a row or two apart.
So let's start with, what does it mean to say Hollywood is dead? Let's define that.
Yeah, really. When I think of Hollywood, I think of the business, and I think that's fine. Like there may be production going on in Cleveland and Atlanta and Pittsburgh and everywhere else in the world, taking away production from LA, from Hollywood itself. But those people working in those places are all part of unions that belong here. They're mostly part of the deals that got made with the actors, and the writers are all here in Hollywood. Those things start here, then they go make it there. And I can tell you, being from Cleveland, all the production going on there is all basically location shooting. They don't have green screen studios. They don't have post-production facilities that can handle this. So all this, they talk about tax incentives and stuff, taking business from LA. Yeah, there's a little bit of production going away, but most of it's still here, or being overseas in Asia.
Well, it's interesting. Speaking of tax incentives, so I'm from Michigan, and right as I was leaving, the previous governor, I believe it was under Granholm, did a lot with tax incentives because they wanted to make Michigan kind of like a little Hollywood. And I don't think they realized that, yes, it's good as a short-term investment as far as, people come in and they film because they can do it on the cheap in, hotels and restaurants and stuff like that. But they didn't have the infrastructure, like you're saying, the green screens, the sets, the talent even. I'm not even talking like acting talent, but just crew talent. They didn't have that. Everyone had to be shipped in from LA, and they didn't have the infrastructure. And by the time they built the infrastructure, the new governor was like, I don't want to do tax incentives for filmmaking. It's too costly. Let's go into, biotechnology instead. And so it's one of those things, like Atlanta's doing it really well, but Atlanta's been doing it for years. And you have to have stuff in place if you're really going to be competitive.
Cleveland benefited from Michigan's governor killing their tax benefits because we had a film commissioner in Cleveland who was from LA, actually, and he lobbied Columbus, the governor, to put in these tax incentives and then increase them. And then on top of that, he really worked on building the infrastructure. He pushed for classes. I think they started a production, like a TV film production class at Cleveland State University. They were building a studio there, so they were starting to build some infrastructure. They still can't do major stuff, but they're training people so that when movies want to come to that area, they can hire locally, and that saves them transportation and housing and those kind of costs.
Yeah, because they want to do it from start to finish. They don't want to just bring people in for filming and then leave, and all the post stuff goes out of state anyway.
Well, the post stuff still goes out of state. There's not a whole lot of that in Cleveland. I mean, there's some commercial stuff, like for doing, like ads and stuff for TV. Not as, not, full on, like we're going to do Harry Potter. We're not going to do that kind of stuff. it's been growing. It's been good. Is it ever going to be Hollywood level? No. I mean, you look at they talk about the industry changing and the production going elsewhere, but LA studios are still packed with production. I mean, not right now because of COVID, but before COVID, they were 96% busy. And that's because now with all the streaming stuff, there's more content being generated. So you still need everything that's going on in LA, but you still can go other places as well. And a lot of that has to do with TV and shows, not necessarily feature films, which can be done on location. You need studio space for, weekly shows. That's here pretty much. Or, used to go to Vancouver a lot for that and some in Toronto.
And you know what, I don't think what people realize either. I didn't even know it until I was on set, like, this is pre-pandemic now, but a lot of studios actually share space with each other, and a lot of streamers rent space from current studios. So everybody's using everybody's facilities out here.
Absolutely. Studios are huge investments in real estate, basically. And you build all these sound stages, you want them busy all the time. And if your own network doesn't have enough shows to fill it up, or they want to film it somewhere else for some reason, yeah, you're gonna rent that space out to whoever can use it. And like Netflix does not own studio space. They own some office buildings here in Hollywood, but they have some studios in there, but they don't own it. It's not theirs. So they're gonna go wherever they can. And that's part of the business that maybe people don't understand is just because, it's ABC or NBC or CBS is showing the show or Disney Plus, it may not be them who's producing it. You're going to hire a production company a lot of times to make these shows, and they're going to make it wherever they want to. They may not even be in California, but they're making the show. I mean, like The Walking Dead was all filmed in Georgia, like kind of on location. But it's AMC's here in Hollywood, or they're actually, I think, are they over in West Hollywood or Beverly Hills area?
I have
That
no
area.
idea.
I've gone by their offices over there. You can see it from Santa Monica Boulevard.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so they're here, but that doesn't mean The Walking Dead has to film here. It's about economics in a lot of ways, and it's just makes more sense to film a show like that on location because it's a very exterior heavy show.
Okay, so Tom, you're contending Hollywood is not dead, but I know a lot of people are worried about streaming services and how that changes the landscape, the costs of production, especially with COVID. There is no pilot season or episodic season anymore. So how about that?
You're right. That's changed huge. That's changed massively. There's been a huge shift there, but it's still, writers got to write. So like our jobs, I think, and specifically for writers, haven't changed all that much. The COVID pandemic has just shown us that writers' rooms can go virtual. Writers are generally just locked in rooms, various places writing, so they don't always have to be where things are being made. That's always been the case. But now it's even more obvious that writers don't have to be in LA. Now, as far as like, we came to LA to act. You want to be an actor and a writer, and I want to be a writer. You come here and we've done an episode on do you have to be in LA to be a writer? And I think my big takeaway from that was this is where a lot of stuff happens as far as networking and growing your craft and the experience of Hollywood and meeting people and being able to get in that route. That I think has really changed now because one thing I've wondered is, well, since COVID hit, did I even need to stay in LA? I could have gone back to Ohio, for
But
8-9 months.
I'm gonna argue with you on a certain point here
Oh, sure, go ahead.
because you don't you still have to start somewhere. Like, from what I can tell, the casting directors that are doing it remotely, the writers who are doing it remotely, even the actors, like, I think Mindy Kaling has a house in New Hampshire, and like Jeremy Renner doesn't even live here. He's like in Vegas. But what's the common denominator for all of them? They started out in LA. And then once they built a name, they were able to leave. So all those writers who are writing remotely and still writing for big shows, they still were here before the pandemic hit. The pandemic just allowed them to move back to, wherever their home state was and save a little bit of money. But they didn't start in their home state and somehow break into Hollywood. They were in Hollywood and had already broken out and then were able to leave and do it remotely. So there's the difference.
I do agree with that. I actually do not contest that at all. But I think things have changed a little bit. I'm in a writing program right now called Get It Made, and we do everything on Zoom right now because of the pandemic. And the people on this program are all over the place. They're not all in LA, but they have access, is what I'm thinking. What I'm saying is people, writers everywhere have access to the same um, network and opportunities that we do currently in Hollywood, because we can't go to mixers and meetings and whatever talks by agents and managers. We don't have extra access right now that people outside of LA are missing right now, at least for the moment, unless it goes back to something like it was. The playing field is a little more level, I think.
To an extent, but I will argue again that I don't the pandemic isn't happening long enough to create, like, not that it's not creating permanent change, it is, but not such long-term change. Like, if this pandemic went on for 5 years, yes, suddenly, somebody from, Maine or something can break into Hollywood and never have to move at all. I would agree with you on that. But it's really only been about a year and a half, and we're already making progress to get out of it. So I think it'll shift things, but I don't think it's gonna be like this crazy, avalanche of stuff where you're like, "Oh my gosh, everything changed." It's just gonna be minor subtle shifts.
I do agree again. Yes. No, I'm not trying to play both sides of it, but I do agree that for writers in general, it hasn't been that long, and I do believe that agents and managers and the availability of networking events will come back, because I think it's not a technology issue for writers in general. I think one thing you might see though is a lot of the post production may stay virtual. There has been a huge investment in technology to keep production going in the pandemic, where you have editors and sound designers and all these, just like you're doing recording at home in your closet slash studio. I think a lot of that investment that people have put into that they're gonna want to use that on an ongoing basis. So they may say, hey, you know what? We're saving a lot of money on office space by outsourcing this way, and it's working.
But that stuff had already been a lot of post had already been being outsourced. Like, even when you did the effects for Reclamation, you outsourced to what, like, India or something, and that was, like,
Hmm.
5 years ago, way before the pandemic.
Oh yeah, that
So
definitely happened. But I mean, there are studios in LA that have set up to work remotely. A lot of animation we talked about, has been ongoing, but they've had to come up with outsourced methods of doing it. Company I used to work for that does distribution for online streamers had
mhm.
people starting to work from home. They just set up the network so they could handle the large files and access the systems remotely in a secure way, so that they could keep their their workflow going at the same level without having to have people in the office. So they might consider having some people continue to work that way.
You know what I would tell people? This is not really like a "Is Hollywood dead?" thing, we can circle back to that. But if you're interested in doing anything remotely Hollywood, directing, producing, writing, acting. What I would do now, which you maybe should have been doing even during the beginning of the pandemic, save up your pennies, save, 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 and then the minute the pandemic is over, if you think you want to come to LA, move out here, because it's actually right now more expensive to leave California than it is to come. And I think that's gonna stay the same for a couple months after the pandemic kind of, is under control. So if you think you want Hollywood, save up now, and that money is gonna go so much further than it would have been even 5 years ago. And I think that once things are quote unquote "safe" again, I have a feeling people are gonna go nuts. Like, we're gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, all the Christmas parties, all the networking events, everything." Like, I feel like everyone's because we've been so cooped up, I feel like it's just gonna, like, really bounce back in a crazy way. So, that's just my
We're
advice.
also thirsty. We're also what do you call it? Cabin fever. We all want to get out and mix and mingle again.
Seriously, I mean, I really think that's because also a lot of people left LA during the pandemic because of cost of living, because they wanted to be home with their families, and, one one of the things that a friend told me a long time ago, that this was related to acting, but I would think it's anything entertainment, is the people who say, "Oh, I'm just gonna go back home for a few months," they never come back. And actually, Tom, you were talking about leaving for a few months and moving back to Ohio or going to Florida with your folks. And I said, "Don't leave because if you leave, you probably won't come back." You know?
I think you forget how actually kind of tough LA is, and once you're here and you get entrenched, you kind of get used to it. I think once you leave and you realize it's so much easier not to be in LA, you might not want to come back but it's a trade off again. You don't
Mhm.
have the access, so it's still harder to get into the business not being here.
But that's what I'm saying, it's like
Yeah,
after the pandemic settles down, I have a feeling because there's still enough people out here, there's still enough of the old guard doing things in the quote unquote "old-fashioned way," the way it's always been done, that it's not gonna that's why I'm saying it's not gonna change right away. But if you come out here the minute the pandemic sort of, tapers out and it seems safe to move, your money's gonna go so much further, you're gonna meet so many more people, and you're gonna come in when it's cheaper and easier to move here and live here.
yeah, I've read that rents are down. In fact, I moved in October of 2020, and I got a move-in deal, like a
Mhm.
discount for moving in, and they never do that in LA because they're always so full. So something's going on when people are offering move-in incentives
Yeah.
because they're trying to fill spaces. That's really unusual, and definitely was an exodus because of the pandemic. And I don't. There's been an exodus from LA in general over years, but people keep moving here too. So it's kind of a
Mhm.
churn. A lot of people have gone to Austin or gone to up to like Oregon. I think in Seattle a lot, and Colorado a lot. People moving from LA to Colorado. I don't know if those are Hollywood people though. They may just be Angelinos who are tired of LA in general.
I know that Oregon had a lot of, like, LA expats, I
Portland was
guess.
was
Portland
doing a
was,
lot
like,
of
kind of
production,
yeah.
yeah.
I believe right now with Austin, it's more like a Silicon Valley exodus. So if you're in tech, a lot of them are going to Austin, but I don't think it's necessarily entertainment.
A lot of people are saying that actually Silicon Valley is going to be the competitor to Los Angeles, to Hollywood.
Really? How come?
Well, you look at the technology in the film business with CGI movies and getting into CGI actors and the holographic stuff where they're recreating dead people.
Oh.
Yeah, and even starting to things like I know it hasn't been very successful, but artificially intelligent computers writing scripts, even stuff like that. A lot of journalism is now being done by computers, by artificial intelligence. Things like sports news stories and stock news stories can be formulaic enough that they can have computers write those. Some of that is actually happening. I still don't think they're going to have screenwriting being done by artificial intelligence yet.
Oh, that makes me so sad. There's
Yeah,
there's a lot of things happening in the industry that are making me sad, but, oh, that's definitely one of them. I really hope
yeah.
I don't see that ever happen in my lifetime. Oh my goodness. So then, I guess when we say, "Is Hollywood dead?" Are we talking the streaming wars and movie theaters versus the little screen for releases? Is that what they mean by Hollywood is dead?
Yeah, when you think of Hollywood, you think of the silver screen. I think that's something we really has always been a problem. And we saw some changes in the theater business before the pandemic with things like A-list, and Movie Pass, trying to get people into the theaters more because they already had a problem with lagging ticket sales. And those seem to be working. I mean, I was going to the movies a lot with A-list. I don't know if it was making the movies any money because of how many movies I was seeing, but it was a way to try to generate more traffic in the theaters. I think it was better for the theater owners, if anything, because they sold more concessions.
I mean, I know they were saying that theaters were kind of dying beforehand, like, theaters kind of run like gas stations where they make more money off the concessions than they do off
Yeah.
the actual product. It's interesting because I feel like I mean, and we're seeing some of it change already, but there's reasons that you wanted to have a theatrical release, like to be, a contender for awards and stuff like that, that obviously with the pandemic has changed. But at the same time, I mean, like, for example, like, I saw Wonder Woman 1984 when it came out, and I was so disappointed, and I kind of wonder a friend of mine actually said he saw it he's back in the Midwest, he saw it in the theater, and I'm like, I wonder if seeing it in the theater would have covered all its story flaws, you
Oh,
know?
the big screen spectacle, the surround
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough.
I've seen the movie. I don't think that would have helped that much. I think that was a story problem. But I know what you're saying. There's the theatrical experience is still something we like. And
Hmm.
we still like going on dates to the movies. We still like getting together with friends and our family to see a movie and going to dinner. It's a social thing. I don't think it's going away. As long as we get vaccinated and can get back out into the world, people are going to want to go to the movies. It's kind of like I liken it to the DVD video home video aspect of it. You used to get I used to get a lot of VHS tapes and DVDs as presents, CDs too. Even books used to be great things you would give as presents. Well, now what do you give as a present? Everybody gets everything digitally. Do you give a gift card to Netflix or a gift card to even if you get a gift card to Amazon, you can buy things digitally, digital books, digital games. So it's kind of like that's taken away a big chunk of gift giving, I think, as like the creative side of it anyway. I don't think that's going to happen with theaters. People are still going to want to go to theaters. So I don't think the digitization of video, like that you can have it downloaded into your home, is going to change the behavior of people that like going to the movies.
Well, there's two things with the streaming to think about. First of all, if everything if everything is shot for you shoot different for a movie screen versus for like a TV screen, right? So like for example, Ben-Hur is very like epic and sweeping. That doesn't translate as nice onto a little screen unless you have a really big TV at home. So certain things like Gravity, I would never have wanted to watch that on my TV at home. That one you needed a big screen to see it and to appreciate it. So you have to tailor your film to where you think it's gonna end up. And it's disappointing if you're shooting for something theatrically and then, thanks to COVID or whatever, it ends up going on a streaming thing and it loses some of that magic because you're watching it on something that's like what, I don't even know, 56 inches versus however big a movie screen is. You know what I'm saying? So you have to think about or like when you watch something on your phone, right? Watching something on your phone, you don't want some big epic wide shot because you're like, I can't tell, is that an ant or is that a person? So
Yeah.
it depends on the screen. Um, I forgot what the second point was.
Well, I get what you're saying, and obviously you wouldn't want to watch a TV show on a movie screen because then it's mostly gigantic heads looking at you, right?
Mhm. Oh, I remember the second point now. The other interesting thing, which nobody's really brought up in terms of streaming services, I've heard it in other places. Like, for example, I play a lot of video games right now. And one of the things they talk about in terms of like all those video game providers, like if you get stuff digitally on your Switch or like you buy something through Steam, if the service goes out, you don't own those games, they're gone. So it's the same kind of thing with a movie service, like HBO or Disney or whatever. If they decide to pull the content or pull the plug, you can't go back and watch that in your library anymore. Nobody's really talked about that.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, but if you're buying a movie, I think even with Mulan, when Disney Plus put that out and you had to pay $30 for it, I think they technically were selling you a license where you would actually own the video, so they couldn't pull that particular copy from you. But if it's just streaming on their regular service, yeah, they have total control. Things come and go all the time from those, so you don't own that. You're just renting basically at that point. So you get to watch it for as long as it's visible. I don't think that's going to deter people from streaming services. I mean, I used to buy a lot of DVDs, even TV shows, but now that they're on streaming, I feel like, why do I need to own that? I mean, unless the end of the world comes and I can only watch things I have on disc, um, almost everything's available somewhere all the time.
But I think my point with the fact that you don't own it is like it kind of makes the media we consume even more disposable. Like, I don't have to watch a good movie because I only need to watch it once and I'm never going to watch it again,
Right?
which
Yeah.
means you're not writing and filming really good art.
No, and that's something to consider with indie filmmaking, especially, and production and the business model side. Getting back to the business of it is
Mhm.
if it is being created for streaming, which so much of it is now, and how like Warner Brothers talks about all their films are going to release on streaming as well. How does that change the business model for writers, for actors, for producers who used to get paid, or maybe they still do somehow get paid the quote unquote back end. If a movie is really successful, what's the reward if it's all based on just subscriptions versus sales, even just DVDs or ticket sales? Yeah.
I mean, before, for example, even on regular broadcast TV, they would rerun, Sound of Music or Star Wars so much, I'm sure those people got tons and tons in royalty,
If they
because it was
if
a
they had it in their
specific.
contract, yeah.
Yeah, well, because it was for a specific program that was being licensed, but if it's subscription and it's a smorgasbord, how do you know what movie everyone's watching, and how do you divvy up the pie?
I mean, the streamers know that. The question is whether or not they're paying based on that.
They're very secretive about
Yeah.
the numbers.
If you go to Netflix and make a deal, are they buying out the movie in perpetuity, whole heart, whole hog kind of thing, and you just get one big payment, and then that's divvied up somehow with, everybody who's in on in it.
Mhm.
And right now is the trickiest part, because some people signed on to movies where they were supposed to be paid based on a percentage of box office, and it's not going to the box office like they thought. And these are big actors, who aren't used to having their movies pulled from theaters.
Mhm.
They're pretty guaranteed that the movies was going to go to the theater. So that's there have been some stories about payments to actors, some big actors, when that happened. Like I think it was this Gail Gadot, for Wonder Woman, and what was the other one? I can't remember. But yeah, something like that, where that's kind of been a shift in the business. Again, it may be temporary, may not be. The whole Warner Brothers thing is still kind of being hashed over. I think there were some legal questions about whether they would be able to actually do what they said they were going to do, is releasing all their films day and day on streaming and theaters where they can release in theaters.
And now it's time for a cross promo break. Speaking of your favorite films, here's some information on a great show called the Adult Beverage Film Podcast.
Like having a drink and talking films?
Yup.
The Adult Beverage Film Podcast is your go-to podcast.
Hey, stop.
Join the conversation and listen to film industry producers, actors, directors, writers share all of their experiences in the film industry. Expand your mind into films you've already seen.
Say hello to my little friend.
Plus, find new films to watch in the future. Visit adultbeverage.net or go to your favorite podcast platform and listen to Adult Beverage Film Podcast episodes today.
Now, speaking of the digital space, and this kind of comes up with some of the newer things that are happening in entertainment news right now. I mean, is Hollywood dead because you have things like YouTube and TikTok?
Yes, those are huge competitors, and I think we just talked about recently. There was an article about, um, uh, was it TikTokers or YouTubers? I can't remember. We're going to be
Influencers in general.
influencers in general.
Yeah.
We're going to be represented by SAG,
Yep.
and that
Yep.
wow, that's a huge change. And we talked about it from a writing perspective, because these people who are YouTubers, who technically are creating content, are they writing it? Are they going to be represented by the WGA at some point?
Mm-hmm.
We have the WGA. The WGA does cover unscripted shows, right? So
I don't think it does.
does
I
it? Oh.
don't think it covers reality TV. To my knowledge, reality TV is all non-union.
Ah, okay. So those would mostly probably fall under that then. I wouldn't expect to see the Writers Guild jump into that
But not
fray, but
necessarily, because some creators, they do scripted stuff. If you do a sketch show, that's scripted. People
mhm.
who do like parody videos of Disney songs or something, that's scripted.
Yeah, we did
You know?
Reclamation. That's a scripted show.
Yeah. I mean, the
Supposed
things that are unscripted are people who are like, look at my life hack or watch me,
yeah,
skateboard down a staircase or something. Like, little slice of funny, things like
yeah.
that. But yeah, but I mean, it's an interesting landscape.
Mhm.
Because yeah, I do wonder what it means for, are they going to be producers, directors, also those guilds? And I mean, part
Yeah.
of the joy of YouTube and TikTok is that it's not scripted television.
It's different, yeah. And
Mhm.
and when those people become represented by the union, how does that change how their work is, compensated and distributed? So suddenly, is YouTube going to have to start, signing deals with agents and managers and that kind of stuff? Because you hear about people on TikTok getting representation.
Oh, a lot of influencers
Yeah.
already have managers. Like, the big ones already have representation. That's not, I mean, because you can have representation and not be in the union. That has nothing to do with it. But it's interesting because the articles, there's a New York Times article, we'll put in the show notes. It did say follower count doesn't matter. It only matters if the influencers had brand deals. And so that also makes me wonder, like, what's the union angle on that?
It could come back to that though. Imagine you're a YouTuber with millions of followers. Okay. You generate a lot of advertising revenue for YouTube. So what happens when the agent goes back to YouTube and says, we want a new deal? We want a bigger cut of that ad revenue because, YouTube's taking a lot of it. So it could come into play. That could be something we see in the future where YouTubers with significant followings can start to demand more from the platform. Similar to Twitch, some of the Twitch channels have hundreds of thousands of viewers every day, so these aren't one-time things. These are people with followers that come back.
But then the question is, does YouTube have a contract for non-union versus union? And the other thing is, like, again, criteria, because right now to get into SAG, you have to either have 3 vouchers from doing background work or your Taft-Hartley lead. They kind of took away or kind of tightened up the web series route in there. So you're back to the old 2 ways. So now this new route is as an influencer, which I like, it's so new, I don't know the terms of it. But then is it also the same thing with SAG where it's, 30 days must join and you can play both sides of it and be union and non-union? Or if you join as a creator, are you instantly union? The other thing is once you're union, you cannot do once you're union, you cannot do non-union work. So what if an influencer gets a non-union branding deal? What does that mean for them?
Right, and I think we actually checked because the Writers Guild does have a new media representation as well.
Mhm.
So a lot of people who write like web series may not realize it, but they could possibly be qualified to get into the union if you have a series that has enough episodes, enough minutes. You actually can become a WGA writer through doing something digital.
Mhm.
I guess, going back to the original question, is Hollywood dead? It's like, no, it's just constantly changing. Hollywood is just like any other industry. It's going to evolve. And this series of events that we've gone through in recent years and the changes over the past couple of decades are all part of it. And it's going to be fine. It's just going to be different.
It's going to be very different.
Well, what do you guys think? Do you believe us? Do you think Hollywood's alive and well, or do you think it's on the way out? Let us know in the comments, and just share this with your friends and give us a review on iTunes if you can.
Great, we'll see you guys soon.